You're listening to Resilience Rising. Tune in for eye-opening conversations on diverse poverty topics as we empower communities and share inspiring stories. Find out how you can be a community changemaker and get involved in building more resilient futures for all. On behalf of Brian and myself, I'm honored to acknowledge that we are currently recording on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe include the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. CFS Counseling and Wellbeing and United Way Simcoe Muskoka respect Indigenous history and culture and are dedicated to moving forward in the process of reconciliation with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. I'm Amanda Fellows from CFS Counseling and Wellbeing.
And I'm Brian Shelley from United Way Simcoe Muskoka. And today we are joined by Noor Siddiqui, who's going to share with us her personal story of immigration to Canada. After settling in Barrie, Noor turned her lived experience into a profession through the Spark program, where she helps others who are coming and moving into our community. Noor, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Noor, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about the Spark program.
For sure. So, Spark program is offered by CFS Wellbeing and Counseling. Not too long ago, 1 year to be exact, when we started this program, Spark, and I was hired thanks to Amanda. I appreciate that. I love my job, and through Spark, we are able to help newcomers, new immigrants, integrate to the community, introduce them with the resources and social support.
And I understand that Spark is funded through the County of Simcoe.
Right, yeah. So Sparked is funded through the County of Simcoe, through the SCIF Fund, or the Simcoe Community Investment Fund, which has been really great. I think it really highlights the county's dedication to supporting newcomers and immigrants in our community. And I think this is a critical conversation for today, just because we, as a county, we've had a pretty large influx of newcomers all across the region since 2016, with some places like New Tech or New Tecumseh having up to 73% of an increase in newcomers, which is really incredible. And so I think this is also a crucial time to be talking about newcomers and immigrants in our community, especially in relation to the fact that our community members are seeing our diversity grow. And I think with some of that, there's pieces that always come up where, you know, we're seeing more judgment or we're seeing more hatred in communities. And so I think this is an opportunity for Resilience Rising and for Noor and the Spark program to really break down some of those misconceptions and talk about what newcomers and immigrants are facing.
Yeah, I mean, you were sharing before that you've lived in this community since you were 5. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the face of Simcoe County change dramatically. I moved up here in 2008, and even since then, it's been an incredible shift, and it's a wonderful shift, and it's a great shift. But with it comes this sense of unknown, right? And I think when there's unknown and there's fear. And I think what Noor is going to share with us today, I'm hoping, is a little bit of her experience of confronting some of that fear and how we as a community can be more welcoming and more understanding as newcomers move up to our community.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think we can use this opportunity to bust some of those myths around that. Yeah. And maybe we can start by speaking about, you know, the Canadian dream, right? This concept of the Canadian dream that so many newcomers and immigrants come to Canada with. And can you tell us a little bit about what that's like for folks, like what they're experiencing in their country of origin around what is the Canadian dream? And then when they get here, is that the same? Is what they thought the same when they arrive?
Thank you, Amanda, for asking me this question. Canadian dream. I like this term, but in reality, it's really scary. It's a scary, scary dream. Initially, Canadian dream starts when somebody thinks coming to Canada and think about better employment opportunities, universal health care, good education for them or for their family, inclusive society. But unfortunately, after coming or arriving to a new country, experience is different than a dream.
How is it different? What does that look like?
Different in a sense that when they come here, it's hard, for example, having a universal healthcare, which is amazing. And I'm personally grateful. We all are having a personal universal access to healthcare system. But having a family doctor, it's nearly impossible, not only for newcomers, for everybody in Canada. It's nearly impossible to get a family member. And many other people who are coming from different country or different region in the world, they have different system. For them, going to medical care is just maybe 2-minute walk for them, and they will have x-rays done, they will have all sort of things done. But in Canada, it's a process of,
Right.
it's just a different process. So it's just, everything is different, and nothing prepares them. No website, no resources that prior to coming to Canada can prepare them of the reality of being here.
So is there a disconnect between the promise for someone before they move to Canada and what they experience?
Absolutely. It's a disconnect, it's a huge gap. For example, having parenting style. It's for, if I speak on my personal experience, me being a newcomer and not be able to speak English language not too long ago. I just recently started speaking English, and me being a parent had a different mindset. I had more control being a mom. I had more in my head. I had more power, as my parents had, to this date they have. But in Canada, it's more parental responsibilities compared to the rights.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So it's an example that newcomer doesn't understand until they come to Canada. And we just struggle as a newcomer for many different aspects of life.
So building on this theme of the Canadian dream, I want to focus specifically on poverty. And so what are some of the systemic barriers that you see reoccurring with your client or with the folks that you serve through the Spark program, specific to being a newcomer to our community, that can lead to folks experiencing poverty at a different rate or an increased rate maybe than those who've been here longer?
Is it possible to repeat your question in a different way maybe so I can understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, thank you. I guess when we think about the Canadian dream, I assume that there's again, I'm making assumptions, right? But there's an assumption that folks are coming hoping for prosperity. But we also know that recent immigrants tend to be more likely to experience poverty, certainly in the short term. And I'm wondering if you can share some systemic barriers that you've seen with your clients that have, like, why is that? Why is it that folks, when they settle in Canada, do experience poverty at an increased rate?
I think because of lack of information, lack of knowledge, and lack of understanding. For example, if I see a client and they are not aware, for them, grocery stores are the same in Canada.
Right.
Whether it's Metro or Loblaws or No Frills or Freshco, to them it's just a grocery store. But when I sit down and I'm able to make them understand the difference between the price is different. Because of the economy is affecting everybody, cost of living is increased everywhere. It's been struggle, especially into newcomer, within the newcomer community, because they don't have lots of funds
Right.
to start with or to begin with, or the employment to survive. I'm sorry, I'm losing my everything.
I think the employment piece is also a really big aspect of that, right, Noor? So you talk a lot about how people will come to Canada thinking that they're going to have the Canadian dream because maybe they do have the education back home. Maybe they do have the skills and the resources back home. And they think that those things are going to be transferable here because Canada is this place where everybody lives their best life. When in reality, a lot of those things aren't transferable here. So even when it comes to employment, what are some of the barriers people face to accessing employment?
The number one barrier that people have faced is, of course, language barrier.
Yeah.
You could be a doctor in Afghanistan or any other region in the world and not necessarily you speak English, and then that would be the first challenge for you. Having said that, coming here, you don't have references, you don't have resources, you don't have knowledge where to apply, how to apply, and then you being a doctor or whoever doesn't count it here. So it's a possibility that you will be ending up driving a cab or Uber. And it's okay. I think it's okay for the newcomer because they come with the mindset to work harder, to work. That's a mindset that they bring. It's a struggle. It's an emotional struggle, of course. And but they do it, whatever it takes for them to survive in new country.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly something that I've learned, I think, through listening to your work with newcomers. is how hard immigrants and newcomers are willing to work when they come here. And there is this interesting misconception in the community that when newcomers come, they just come and they live off the social service system.
Right.
When really, I would argue that they're some of the most hardworking folks in our community. And, you know, Brian, earlier when you were talking about how we can see the diversity across our community, a lot of newcomers and immigrants are filling those service jobs across.
Yeah.
Like I can see that everywhere I go, are filling those retail jobs, those social service industry jobs. And those are also the jobs that don't pay a ton of money, right? And afford some of the lifestyle here.
So that's where we're systemically slotting
Yeah.
folks actually into jobs where they're kind of, you know, they may be making less than a living wage, for example.
Right.
Nor, earlier when you and I were speaking before we started recording, we were talking about also international students, and certainly international students have been in the news a lot recently with some proposed caps on international students. We'll get into that maybe another time, but I want you know, when we're thinking about employment, you were sharing some barriers or some constraints that international students may be facing as well that could also contribute to this.
I think international students faces the hardest way when it comes to coming to a new country, because they come with the funds based on 2013 or 3 income or low cost of living.
Right.
They don't have the funds to provide or support their lifestyle in Canada. Also, they're not allowed to legally work in Canada more than 20 or 25 hours. So it's really hard for them to survive on daily basis, and most of the time they end up working under the table, which is of course not right.
So we've set up a system basically that's forcing folks to work outside the parameters of society or of what we're expecting people
to afford their daily needs.
Yeah.
I think you made a good point too earlier, Brian, in our conversations around how we're setting folks up for failure, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about international students coming here, you know, they're required to come with a certain amount of money in their bank account, but that number is reflective of a cost of living rate from 2013, like you're saying, Noor, right? So how are we setting those students up for success? In the same way, for newcomers and immigrants coming over, you know, we pitch this idea of the Canadian dream, and then they come over and it's not the reality, and are we setting them up for failure, right? So systemically, we continue to set, however folks come to be here, whether they're refugees, newcomers, international students, the system itself has already set people up to fail. And then as a community, we judge that reality.
And stigmatize it.
And place the blame on individual people, when the reality is the system set them up to fail from the beginning.
And they were promised a different reality.
That's right. Yeah, that's really challenging. And I think the nice thing about the Sparked program and the investment in social integration is that there are so many of those systemic things we can't control, we don't have control over. So as a community, how do we come together and support people from a social integration perspective? And how do we help them to overcome the poverty pieces and economic barriers from that social integration piece? And so, you know, Noor, your point about, you know, teaching people to shop at Freshco instead of Metro, that's one way, a simple way and practical way that we're helping support people get access to food in a way that's more economically friendly. What are some other thoughts you have around that, around how your program and the work you're doing helps people to overcome poverty?
I think for me, based on my experience again as a newcomer, not too long ago, I've faced similar challenges that my client is facing right now. So for me, the introduction to the resources within the community, within the Simcoe County, that's my biggest goal, that I want them to know what's available for them, where they can do, because as a newcomer, you might not necessarily know what's available. For example, 211, having a 211 helpline, I had no idea.
Right.
Personally, I had no idea not too long ago. I learned, and now I'm telling everybody, call 911, same as 911.
Yeah.
It's just not for medical emergency, but for it's a resources for you, helpline for you to gain knowledge and resources. I'm encouraging them to volunteer so they can make connections, they can understand the Canadian lifestyle. I'm encouraging them to meet people, having conversations with neighbors, with wherever basically they go. To learn about gain more knowledge into Canadian society. Also, through Spark, we are able to provide conversation circle Scrabble Club and Coffee and Cross Club, which is amazing for their social needs. They've been coming to all these groups and because they're socially isolated.
Yeah.
They don't have necessarily friends or family in Canada or Simcoe County. So these programs are great for them to have social life.
Fantastic. When you came to Canada, let's go. How long ago was it that you immigrated to Canada?
I came here in 2003, but I don't count that. My circumstances were different, so I counted until I came to Simcoe County in 2010.
Okay, so tell us, but when you moved up here, when you moved to Simcoe County in 2010, what were some of the services that helped you become integrated to the community?
First thing comes to my mind is YMCA, and I really want to appreciate one person. I hope she listens to me. Her name is Ruth Miller.
Yeah.
She was the first person in Canada for me, in Simcoe County, for me to become somebody who can guide me, who I can trust. Even though I had language barrier, I did not speak a word of English back then. And only because of YMCA, I had the sign of welcome in my own language. That was the first thing that I saw, and I felt comfortable going inside. Otherwise, I would have just walked by because I was not aware of YMCA and their services.
Right.
So, yeah, social agencies like YMCA, United Way, CFS, Counseling Wellbeing, they're doing amazing work, and my job is to tell people, especially newcomer, what's available for them and what else they can just have through all these services, all these all these social agencies.
Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful. And I actually know Ruth. I used to work with Ruth, and she's a wonderful
She's
person.
amazing, yes.
Yeah, that's so wonderful you had that connection. I guess we started this off by talking about how the face of our community is changing, and that means that the faces of our neighbors are changing. And while many of us celebrate that, we've identified that there's this sense of unknown, and with unknown comes fear, and with fear sometimes comes bad behavior, or often comes bad behavior. What's the one thing that you would want someone in Simcoe County to know about what it's like to be a newcomer to this community?
I understand it's challenging, but I want to just send out this message to everybody that don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. If you look somebody who looks different than you, who might dress different than you, don't be afraid. Don't be too quick to judge that is wrong. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong always. Ask questions and just reach out to them. Say hello. Ask their name. Ask them where they're from. Maybe you will learn a little bit more about their culture, and you will feel like you have knowledge of their culture, and you won't be afraid. And just be friends with everybody. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here today and sharing with us. Today's special guest was Noor Siddiqui, whose professional contact information will be shared on the podcast pages along with further resources. I'd also like to thank our partners at Uplift Black. We recorded today's podcast at the Upbeat Box Studio in the heart of Barrie. And finally, I want to thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and use social media to let others know about Resilience Rising, the podcast that shatters poverty myths, sparks optimism, and fuels innovative change through community-inspired discussions. You can share our podcast using the hashtag Resilience Rising.
And we'll see you next time on episode 5, which will be dropping soon, when we discuss studying while poor, interventions for youth juggling the 3 R's and a big P, where we'll be discussing the 3 E's, equity, not equality, in education. I'm Amanda Fellows of CFS Counseling and Wellbeing with my co-host Brian Shelley from United Way Simcoe Muskoka. We're asking you to embrace innovative change to ensure our communities are great places to live for everyone. Thanks.